Huge day of Premier League football. Arsenal remain unbeaten, but against a 10-man Chelsea, who currently still sit third in the Premier League table, just behind Manchester City, in what looks to be a pretty decent situation for the Blues. And also, Arsenal, I think they should be a little bit disappointed with their performance today. Probably should have done a lot better with 11 men against 10, but there was a lot to unpack. Lots of moments, lots of tactical highlights, and it was all in all a really interesting game. But what I really liked was that despite having 10 men for half the game, I'd argue the entirety of the match Chelsea were the better team, and as a Chelsea fan, I'm obviously over the moon about that. But I do think Arsenal should have done a lot better with the advantages that they had and the tactics that we expected them to go with. Let's jump straight into it because there's a lot to talk about, a lot of players that I want to discuss, and some real standout players as well that I think deserve some appraisal. But as we see, lineups looked something like this. Pretty sensible from both teams, nothing really outrageous. I think the only main thing that we noticed was there was no Saliba, obviously no Gabriel as well, so it's Hincapié and Mosquera at the back for Arsenal. I wouldn't say it really influenced too much. I think it affected their build-up play quite a lot today, but it wasn't match determining, if that makes sense. I don't think Saliba could have come into this team and would have won the game for Arsenal. So, all in all, good squad from both sides actually, and obviously we saw Cole Palmer back on the bench as well for Chelsea, so huge signs for them. But this is what the team look like. But actually, for the first half, or at least up until the 40th minute, I think Chelsea were the better team, and they really pushed high up the pitch. We know they like to go man for man, as do Arsenal, high up the pitch, but they went man for man and actually caused a lot of problems for Arsenal when they were building up, and it looks something a little bit like this. And there's two people that I really want to highlight in these moments. One is Reece James and the other is Mikel Merino. Both were very crucial, and we're going to talk about Reece James in a little bit more detail in a little bit later on. But we saw this situation where Arsenal were trying to play out from the back using their centre-backs. They split their centre-backs really wide to try and force a problem for João Pedro, obviously playing as the lone striker. He was the one that was doing this screening of the front of David Raya, to block off passes into one of the centre-backs. So say David Raya takes the ball in this position, it's then João Pedro's job to make sure the pass can't come into Hincapié, and same thing the other side. But Chelsea locked on as soon as the pass went into one of the centre-backs. Say the pass came into Hincapié, Esteval jumps, Pedro comes across to block the pass back into Raya, Gusto pushes up onto Calafiori, Fofana across, and then you see Caicedo really lock onto Merino. But what I really liked was the movement of Zubimendi, and it caused a lot of disruption in Chelsea's press, primarily because then what it resulted in Merino being able to do. If we just go back to what it looked like ever so slightly, if it lets me, back into this shape here, what was really interesting was that you'd see, as soon as the pass came out to Hincapié, you'd see Zubimendi drop slightly, which drags Fernandes out, and then you'd see Eze drop, dragging Chalobah, and then Merino could push on into this space, and you end up with a lot of disruption. Reece James was man-marking Declan Rice, so wherever Rice went, Reece James would follow him, but then you end up in a situation where you could see Eze coming all the way over into this kind of pocket, and then does Caicedo pick him up, and they end up swapping a little bit, or do they stay man for man and does Chalobah follow him out? And that was the same thing with Merino on the other side. When Declan Rice drops, you would see a situation where James would follow, Zubimendi could push up, does Fernandes then stay with him? Chalobah, does he stay with Eze? And then it's up to Caicedo, does he follow Merino when he drops? And then you've got all this space that Saka would look to come into, and Arsenal weren't afraid to try and hit it long into the likes of Merino if he was up here, into the likes of Martinelli out wide. They were looking for a direct pass where they could in these moments, but I think Chelsea dealt with it pretty well. Reece James, by the way, incredible. He stayed man for man against Declan Rice, and I think he did a pretty good job at causing a lot of disruptions to prevent Arsenal from playing out through that method, and I was really impressed. Obviously, first half there was a lot of talking points that ultimately determined the game. I mean, the first chance for Esteval, I think it was, he should have buried that. I know it's on his right foot. He's not as strong on that side, but a player in form that he has been playing well. Obviously, he scored a worldie against Barcelona. You expect him to bury that despite being on his weaker foot. He doesn't. Big chance missed, and that would have really given Chelsea a boost, I think. Obviously, then we get to the main talking point in, what was it, the 38th, 40th minute, something around about then, where Caicedo gets sent off. I have a lot to talk about on this, and you might hate me. Was it a red card? Yes, I think so. I have no issue with Caicedo being sent off here, but my issue is, what is the difference in this moment between this on Merino? Yes, it's a bad tackle. I agree, red card. But then this. How is then that not a red card? We talk about this all the time. In the whole football fan industry talks about this all the time. The consistency of refereeing in the Premier League is just not good enough. It was a poor refereeing performance today from Anthony Taylor. I don't think he got a lot wrong. I just think he should have managed the game a lot better, and he didn't. I can explain that in a lot more detail for all of you that probably don't agree with me, but I don't want to get into that right now. We're going to take away from what was a brilliant game. It is a red card, so I'm not against that, by the way. I'm not against it. I do agree. But what was really good for Chelsea was the fact that they went down to 10 men. If you told Chelsea that they were going to play against Arsenal for at least half of the match against 11 men with 10 and still look like the better side, or at least you wouldn't notice they're playing with one less man, you would bite, as a Chelsea fan, I'd bite your hand off. And I think Chelsea deserve a lot of credit for that. They looked really good despite having one man less. They do need to sort out that red card problem, but that's enough of that chat. We're going to have a look at what happens in the second half, because obviously Chelsea now losing Caicedo, a lot changes. And how do they now set up? So it looks something a little bit like this. Obviously, we know Luis Skelly comes on for Calafiori and Garnacho comes on. I think Maresca brings Garnacho on because he's very direct. He likes to take his man on. A little bit more maturity in his performance compared to Esteval, and Garnacho can play on that left-hand side. I think Garnacho was brought on to try and get an Arsenal player sent off. I don't think he offered anything going forward that was miraculous, that was going to change the game, but I think he offered something that could have caused Arsenal some problems. And obviously Mikel Arteta dealt with that by trying to take off all the players that looked like they were going to get a red. I do think Timber and Hincapié need big question marks over their head, but that's irrelevant. When Chelsea had to defend deep, they went man for man. You can see that here. You've got in every... Oh, that's not a good example, but you can see here in every section of the pitch, they go man for man, except for one player, which you could actually argue is, if we say these two all together, I think it's probably Mosquera, the one that you'd argue. João Pedro does this role where he's kind of blocking off passes into Luis Skelly, who's inverted into the midfield. So that the moment the pass comes out wide to Zubamendi, João Pedro shifts across, and Fernandes picks up any movement from Luis Skelly, while Chalobah can follow Eze. If Eze drops, Chalobah follows, Luis Skelly makes this run, Fernandes follows. So that they're very man-to-man oriented, and obviously that means that you're happy to let Arsenal have an extra player with the ball, but that's kind of fine. You have to accept that. If you're going to let the opposition have two players that have no one pressing them, it has to be their defence. And so I have no problem with how Maresca decided to do this. Neto was slightly more advanced in this position. The moment the pass came into Hincapié, he was on it. Even when the pass came back from Zubamendi into Mosquera and João Pedro's over here, Fernandes would try and push up onto Luis Skelly where he can. Neto would be aggressive. He would get forward, and you'd almost lock Arsenal into this kind of position. Where's their free man? That's the question. And actually, it was a very good performance from Chelsea in stopping Arsenal from finding that spare man constantly. You'd see Eze drop, you'd see Merino drop, and obviously as substitutions came on, Odegaard came on for Zubamendi, that had a big influence. But Chelsea dropped into a 5-3-1, I'd guess. Garnacho just stayed on Timber, and it allowed Cucurella to follow Saka inside, which again was crucial, I think. What I did like was Martinelli stayed wide. Where he could, even when the pass was in, when the ball was with like Miles Lewis Skelly or with Hincapié, he would stay really wide to stretch Gusto over here, and Merino would drop to allow Eze to make runs, or Merino would make this runs and Eze would drop to cause this huge gap here for Declan Rice to make the run into. And then it's up to Reece James, can he follow that run? Declan Rice makes this run, can he receive the ball like this? Can he receive the ball in from Martinelli? Reece James has to be switched on, and he was. The entire game, he was sensational, and by far the best player on the pitch. And actually his stats were also ridiculous. You can see here, I mean, the amount of duels he won. I think he won the most ground duels in the game. He won 5 out of 6 of his aerial duels, I believe. I haven't got them written up. I should have done that. But he was ridiculous today. By far the best player on the pitch. Robert Sanchez very close in second, actually, in my opinion. But let's have a look at the goals. Surprisingly, despite being down to 10 men, Chelsea go 1-0 up. And I think it comes from, I mean, ironically, a set piece. It comes from a little bit of a lack of awareness from the Arsenal defenders. You can see here, if we zoom in, this is Trevor Chalobah just here. You can see him, number 23. And he is looking to make a run in this direction towards the front post. And he is being marked by Mr. Jurrien Timber. Oh, wrong button. Mr. Jurrien Timber just here. He's being marked by Jurrien Timber to try and block him off from winning any headers inside the box. That's fine, but I think Jurrien Timber switches off slightly, because as we get into the moment that Chalobah heads the ball, Timber's nowhere to be seen, and Declan Rice, who is zonal in that front post area, has to jump to try and compete with the ball to prevent Chalobah from getting a clean head on it. He doesn't. It's a nice little header that loops into that far post. No one from Arsenal can deal with it. Mascara just watches it fly over his head. It's a really good header, and Chelsea probably actually deserved it, I would argue, going into this moment. Really impressive goal. Nice little routine. I think a little bit of good movement from the Chelsea players, but also poor defending from Arsenal. I think Timber should be doing better. I think Declan Rice had to step in, but maybe he should be doing better as well. But he's obviously behind his man. It's much more difficult in that position, so I wouldn't put the blame on him, but I think it was a nice routine from Chelsea. But then we get on to the moment of madness. We talked about how Chelsea went man for man in their deep defending, and you can see that again here. I mean, you can see here's Reece James. He's followed Miles Lewis-Skelly. You can see Saka and Cucurella over this side. You can see Garnacho's tracked Timber. Chalobah is over here with Merino. Gusto tracks Madueke, and Neto has tracked Eze. They've gone man for man, and in this situation here, this is the key area. In this area of the pitch, you have a 3 versus 3. No problem with that. No problem with that. You just have to pick up your man. I mean, Gusto has to pick up Madueke, Fofana has to track Merino, Neto has to track Eze, and obviously then I guess you have to say that James has to track Miles Lewis-Skelly as well. That's fine. I don't have an issue with this situation, actually. I think that Chelsea are well set up in this moment. But the moment that the cross does come in, Cucurella gets beat. Fine. That's fine. It happens. This is the key issue here. Look at where the header then comes in from Mikel Merino. You can see the ball just here. Look at where Chalobah is. Sorry, not Chalobah, Fofana. Look at where Fofana is over here. He hasn't tracked Mikel Merino, and that is a huge problem because you've now got, in this part of the pitch, a 2 versus 1 with Malo Gusto, who's not exactly known for his ability to deal with crosses anyway. And Merino gets his head onto it, and he's able to fire it into the net as well. That makes it 1-1. I wonder what Fofana is doing here. And I have 2 different theories. I don't know which one's correct. Sanchez has been really good recently, and he's actually been really good at coming out and claiming crosses. I wonder if Fofana is staying here to stay zonal at the front post to allow this little pocket of space for Sanchez to come out and claim the ball if he can. I think in this moment, though, if that is the reason, you don't think about that in this moment. When you are facing a 3 versus 3 in your own box, Fofana needs to make sure he stays switched on and follow his man. If Fofana is here, instead, next to Mikel Merino, he probably wins this header. If you're going to stay at the front post zonal in case there's a low cross that comes in, regardless of why you've stayed there, you have to make sure you get first contact with the ball. And he doesn't. And all in all, Chelsea concede, but they do a good job to see the game out. I think there was a lot of impressive performances. Again, for me, Robert Sanchez, Reece James were the key standouts in this game. Arsenal, maybe a little bit deflated, should have gone on and won this game. The form they've been on, I think we all expected them to win anyway. So for Chelsea to get a point with 10 men and almost play better with 10 men than Arsenal did with 11 says something. Obviously, it's at Stamford Bridge, but I think Chelsea can be really proud with how this performance panned out. They should be happy with that. They do need to sort out that red card issue, though, and Caicedo is going to be missing for a fair few games now. Thankfully, you've got Reece James who can step in the midfield and Andre Santos as well. But as a Chelsea fan, I'm happy. Let me know what your thoughts are down below. Did Chelsea play better? Did they deserve the point? I think so. It just keeps the title race just as interesting as it was before today. And if you want to see my analysis yesterday on another team, a young team that are doing really well in Europe at the moment in Strasbourg, go and check out my Liam Rossigna analysis video. I think Strasbourg are playing brilliantly. It's definitely worth a watch, so go and check that out. But until next time, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all very soon.